Oh, yeah, that would be good. Yeah.
Can everyone rise for the Pledge of Allegiance? Good evening. I want to welcome everyone to a public meeting for the Lower Gwinnett Board of Supervisors for Tuesday, January 13th, 2026. We're going to start off with a presentation, but I'm going to turn it over to John to make introductions.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining us tonight. I'm very pleased to be here for the presentation of this report. Back in, I guess it was the spring, we put out an RFP to take a look at our police department structure and operations, basically taking a look and saying, we know we love the Lower Gwinnett Police Department. We want to get some outside eyes on this to say, how are we doing compared to other departments of similar size, similar call volumes, and what do those best practices look like compared to what we're doing? And with that, we received a tremendous response. We actually heard back from 16 different firms, whittled it down, interviewed a bunch, and the selection committee, that was a mix of police and civilians, came to decide that Certus Public Safety was the best choice for this. The decision was unanimous. They really seemed like the best fit. They had the right experience within Pennsylvania and other departments the same size. So what I'm excited about is I'm going to be introducing Dr. Paul O'Connell here in a second, who was the lead on the study. And what was really interesting to me was how they were able to mix their methods. They took a lot of hard data side with the qualitative data of call response times and volumes and things like that. But then they also spent a good bit of time talking to officers, doing ride-alongs and things like that. So I think what comes out is a really rich picture of what the Lower Gwinnett Police Department looks like now, and hopefully where it can move in the future. So without further ado, Dr. O'Connell, the floor is yours.
Well, good evening, everyone. Paul O'Connell from Certus Public Safety Solutions. I'm here tonight to talk about our study, a staffing analysis and an operational review, really a holistic review of police operations in this community. I should really state at the outset that the unit of analysis for our study was the department itself. It's not the chief, it's not any of the personnel. It's to really take a very comprehensive, qualitative and quantitative, as John says, study of those operations and to benchmark them against best practices as we know it. So tonight I'm going to attempt several things. First, I'm going to tell you what the task was, what we did. Then I'm going to attempt to tell you what we found. I'll explain what the findings were, and then the recommendations as well. I'll try to explain what we recommend and the why. So let me introduce the team. The four individuals who were on the project team are in fact the four principals of Certus. I'm not going to go over our resumes in depth other than saying my three partners have decades of operational experience themselves at the command level. All four of us are doctorally qualified academics, college professors, criminal justice professors. In fact, Carol might be teaching tonight. She might be joining us a little bit later. Jim McCabe is currently at St. John's University in New York. Monty Long taught at Pace University for several years. So we're academics, right? We've actually been on patrol made arrests, supervised police officers, and then studied the science of policing and the art of policing, written books about it. Last year, we wrote a book about how to assess police departments, and we'll get a copy of that book to you folks as well. But tonight, what we're going to do is explain what the four of us did and the how we did it, the methodology. Let me say at the beginning, though, again, I really do want to stress the fact that the unit of analysis is the department. The department has an operational system. Before we landed here, before we came down for our site visit several months ago, we had several questions. We wanted to know how this police department plans its work, how it allocates its resources, how it tracks and evaluates its work, how it assesses its work and its personnel, and how it learns and adapts as the challenges of the day evolve. Policing is a very dynamic business, as we all know. As a threshold matter, let me say this at the outset. One of the critical things, one of the essential things we do in every one of our studies, we look through the lens of risk management. And it's, to us, critically important to scan for any high liability threats. High liability threats in this business typically involves officer safety, public safety, or perhaps integrity issues. These are high liability issues for both the people working in the department, people working in the township, and for the community. We found nothing of concern, no red alerts. A red alert would be that your radios in your patrol cars blank out in certain areas of the community. We've seen that in many communities. That's an officer safety issue. That's a community safety issue. That should have been fixed yesterday. We did not see anything of the sort. So at the beginning, we begin with, I think, positive news, and kudos to the department and its leadership. We then set out to do really a holistic, full examination of this department. And again, as John said, using both quantitative and qualitative methods. So let me talk quickly about the methods. The data. First thing we did was we made a request for CAD data for really an extended period of time, months and months. The CAD system, computer-assisted dispatch system, is the dispatch system when 911 calls come in. It's the assignment of the officers. In many ways, that CAD system is like the black box in the cockpit of a commercial airliner. So regardless of what the department or the chief might report in terms of productivity and the number of calls handled, we can go right to the videotape. We can go right to that CAD system and we could see how many cops were out on the street during this time period, how many calls, what types of calls, how many officers were assigned, how long did they spend on scene, etc. We made the data request through the chief, and thank you to both the chief and the lieutenant. It was a little awkward to obtain the data initially, logistically, just because this department does not have its own dispatch. We had to go through the county, but we got the information we needed, and Jim McCabe's going to talk about what we found momentarily. So that's the data, and we start our analysis with patrol operations, because at its core, policing is about 911 calls for service. If you don't have enough officers out there, it's irrelevant to talk about training or crime analysis or any of these other ancillary support functions. The community needs to be assured that people respond in a timely fashion. So Jim's going to tell you what the analysis showed. We also, as we do, and I should say, kind of tooting our horn here at Certus, the four of us, my partners and I, have performed over 100 of these studies in every region of the United States. As John said, we've done many now in Pennsylvania. We've been in every region of the country, and we do know what best practices are. In all of these studies, we begin with this data dump from the CAD system. We also do a very, very comprehensive document request. Over 100 questions. Initially, when the chief gets it, He's a little alarmed. It's like litigation. It's like a very burdensome discovery request. We ask for training records, recruitment data, crime analysis, number of freedom of information requests. Extremely burdensome, very comprehensive, but it really touches upon all essential police operations. We issued that several months ago. We got an immediate response from this department. They uploaded the requested data to a secure file share site, and we were able to begin our analysis almost immediately. And that was very helpful to the team. In addition to looking at documents, Certus needs boots on the ground, get the feel of the place. So my partners in 2 waves came down for site visits to, first and foremost, meet the people in the department, as John said, meet the supervisors, the detectives, get out and do ride-alongs, but also get out into the community and talk to people living here, working here, and try to assess what they think of the department as well, because there are both internal and external stakeholders for this department, for all police departments. So we did focus groups, several of them convened with both. And I'm kind of proud to say we spoke, I believe, to every member of the department, certainly everyone who wanted to speak to us, either focus groups or extended one-on-one personal interviews to get their lay of the land, their own personal SWOT analysis, the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats for this agency. We took that same question and we asked people who work here, people who teach here, to get, again, a holistic view of this department, to see how it approaches its work. So that was the methodology. That's how we went about it. And it took several months to get through that. Did I turn that off? I'm sorry about that. Yeah. Can we advance that? I'm sorry about that. Yeah, if you could. Okay. So now we're going to get into a little bit of the nitty-gritty. I'm going to try not to, certainly not to bore anybody, but to give Jim something to work with as he now begins to explain what is it we saw when we looked at that black box, when we looked at those calls for service. Because that really does tell you, is this department right-sized in terms of the numbers of men and women they have out on patrol? Are they understaffed? Are they overstaffed? So Jim, if you can unmute yourself, would you be able to take it from here?
I
Thanks,
think you
Jim.
should be able to hear me. Can you hear me?
Yep, hear you fine, Jim. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Paul. And thank you, everybody, for turning out tonight and giving us an opportunity to present some of our findings. I know this graph, this slide looks a little cluttered, a little scary, but we thought it was important to give you some of the data behind the recommendations that we offer. So when we look at operations in a police department, patrol operations, we apply what we call the rule of 60. So the rule of 60 has 2 important components to it. The first part of it is that we believe that officers on patrol answering calls for service should be approximately 60% of the entire number of personnel assigned to the department. So you guys meet that. You have about 70% of officers on patrol, which is a good thing. The second part of the rule of 60 is that we believe that no more than 60% of the time of the officers have on patrol, no more than 60% of their time be spent handling for calls for service. So why is that? Well, we want police officers to be nosy. We want them to be able to respond to calls for service promptly. We want them able to deal with members of the community without being overly burdened with workload coming from calls. So we want a good, healthy amount of uncommitted time so that they can do police work and handle situations in the community most effectively. So as Paul mentioned, we start with the CAD data. But before we did that, what I wanted to show you here is the first part of it is the personnel deployment on patrol in Lower Gwinnett. So what you see here is we look at 4 different periods across a calendar year. We look at summer and winter. So summer is July and August. Winter we define as January and February. And we also look at weekdays and weekends. So it's sort of a seasonal assessment and a temporal assessment, being a day of the week. And why do we do that? Well, we like to see, presumably, you're going to be busier in the summer, and you're going to have more people off in the summer. So we like to see the sort of, the number of people working during those periods of time. And the same thing you'll see in the next slide with calls for service. But here, what we literally did is we asked the Lower Gwinnett PD for the number of people for the schedule, who is working on a day-to-day basis. So the spreadsheets that we were sent, we were able to process that information and put them into these various buckets. So what you see here in the middle of the screen is the gray area. Those are the hours of the day, from the 0 hour on the top, which is between midnight and 1 a.m., all the way down to the 23 hour, which is 11 p.m. And we color coded it to make it a little bit easier to interpret. The green shaded areas are the times of the day in these periods where there is a higher number of officers and supervisors that are working. So you can see on the left-hand side of the chart, on winter weekdays, you have the most amount of people working. The highest amount, as a matter of fact, is in the middle of the day between 10 a.m. and about 3 p.m. You get about 2.82 officers working on average on winter weekdays. The lowest number of officers is on summer weekends. You can see that you only have 1.59 officers from 6 a.m. basically to 6 p.m. the day shift. So you can see the sort of seasonal and weekend fluctuations in the number of officers on patrol. So this in and of itself doesn't tell you a lot. It just shows you what you have available to you when you work. So Paul, if you can go to the next slide. So the next slide is that analysis of the calls for service data that we got from the county. So what we do is we literally take every call that is received and every officer that is assigned to that call, and we calculate the amount of time that is spent handling those calls. And again, this is not for the entirety of the year. We do have that information for the overall calls, but when we look at the workload calculations, we focus on those 4 periods: summer, winter, weekday, weekend. And the idea is that taking that time, we're able to see how busy it is during the times of the day. And again, we color coded it to make the interpretation of this easier. The red shaded areas are where calls for service. The amount of time spent on calls for service is highest, and the green shaded areas is where it's lowest. So not surprisingly, summer weekdays, you can see it's the busiest in Lower Gwinnett in the evening hours, starting from around 5 o'clock in the evening, going on to around 9 o'clock in the evening in those red shaded areas there, with the highest number of amount of time spent by officers on patrol at 1.59 hours. And the lowest amount of time spent on calls, again, not surprisingly, is on winter weekends, where you can see it over in the overnight hours between midnight and say like 7 a.m. And even in the weekday evenings, workload is not that busy. So this gives you a sense of the amount of time spent handling calls for service that were dispatched through 9/11 and through officer self-initiated work. So those are the 2 pieces of the puzzle: the number of officers that are working and the amount of time they spend doing that work. And this leads us to the calculation for the second part of the Rule of 60. We want to see how busy they are. We want to see what is the ratio of time spent handling calls. And we call that the saturation index. And Paul, if you could advance to the next slide. So what you see here on this slide is that calculation. It's the number of the amount of time spent handling calls divided by the number of officers that are available to handle those calls, and that becomes a percentage. And you can see on the left hand to the axis, you can see it goes from 0 and it goes up to 70% here, and that's the blue benchmark bar on the top at 60%. So what we would look for is a workload saturation that is consistently less than 60%. And you can see here on the winter weekdays, winter weekends, summer weekdays, summer weekends, that pretty much all the time the patrol staffing in Lower Gwinnett safely is under that 60% threshold. There's one little, one little blip on summer weekdays. You can see there that the gray line that just clips the 60% threshold. But in its totality here, what we would look at this and say, number one, the 60% of officers on patrol is met, and number two, the 60% workload saturation is met. And that leads us to the conclusion on the next slide that there are ample number of officers on patrol to handle the calls for service, and that we would recommend maintaining current staffing levels, and that no additional uniform officers are needed at this time to handle the current workload and the service demands of Gwinnett. Now, the next part, the next piece, if you can go to the next slide, this is where that sort of quantitative and qualitative work comes in. We know that after speaking with officers in Lower Gwinnett and looking at the way that the shift work is scheduled, we understood that there was an opportunity to make some adjustments that we believe would improve operations. So number one is our first recommendation would to be add 2 patrol sergeants to the patrol staffing allocation, bringing the total number up to 6. So what you can see there in the right-hand table is the number of squads that are assigned in Lower Gwinnett. And currently, the officers on patrol work from 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. or 6 p.m. to 6 a.m. And there are 2 squads that work sort of opposite each other. So when one is off, one is on, and vice versa. So there's always, according to this, there's always 1 sergeant and 3 officers assigned to work 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. They basically chase each other. But what we know is that in order to staff one position 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, you need about 6 people to do that. So when you only have 4 sergeants assigned to work, you are not going to be able to have a sergeant working 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And that reality is born if you scroll back up to the other slide that shows the number of officers that are working. You could see that in about 70% of the times, you only have, and only about 70% of the times you will have a sergeant working. So we see that as a little bit of a concern. Now, the department has a policy where when a supervisor is not working, that an officer is sort of elevated to be the officer in charge that handles patrol supervision. I mean, that's adequate, but it's not ideal. So we would like to see 2 additional sergeants assigned to patrol in order to support the vacancies that might arise in that patrol shift schedule. And we know that there is also an opportunity that you guys had a community response unit that at the time we were there, and I believe currently, that the sergeant that was assigned to that community response unit had to be redirected to patrol to cover shortages on patrol. So having a unit, a standalone unit, I mean, is nice, but it's a standalone unit. You would be better off if you had the functions of that unit integrated into patrol operations. So we saw an opportunity to not only add supervision to the patrol staff, but to leverage those supervisors, not just to provide patrol coverage, but to designate them as community, what we would recommend you call community response sergeants. So it's sort of like a hybrid role, where not only would they provide supervision for patrol, but they would be also there to drive the strategic priorities for the department during each shift. And the idea would be that they wouldn't necessarily be assigned to one of those standard 6 a.m. to 6 p.m., 6 p.m. to 6 a.m. shifts, but they would have somewhat of an overlapping shift, maybe a noon to midnight or something like that, where they would cover both. They would sort of straddle both the day and the night shift. So the idea would be that they would provide patrol supervision coverage. They would be able to leverage the strategic priorities for the department on traffic safety, on crime reduction, on community outreach, and they would also be able to provide administrative support as needed for the department. So we saw this as a win-win-win opportunity. You had a need for supervision on patrol, and you also had a need to cover these other important things in the department. So that's our recommendation, to add 2 sergeants to patrol to handle all these different functions. And if you can go to the next slide, please. So here is sort of a rehash of it. is that you would reassign the community resources unit that's currently that you currently have, the CRU. You redeploy that CRU officer that's sort of dangling there left back to patrol operations to increase the frontline staffing for patrol coverage. And we also see an opportunity to assign the patrol supervisors as somewhat of a neighborhood liaison, that the patrol supervisors would be designated as liaisons to specific neighborhood groups, schools, elected officials, civic associations, block watcher associations, that everybody would have a point of contact with the department. And everybody in the department would have a responsibility for dealing with, managing, and responding to the organized community that's in Lower Gwinnett. And the next one, please. And then lastly, one of the things that we observed is looking at the shift rotation schedule. And currently, the officers on patrol work 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. and 6 p.m. to 6 a.m. And after a 2-week period, they rotate. So you'll do 2 weeks, 6 a.m. to 6 p.m., and then you do 2 weeks, 6 p.m. to 6 a.m. What we know about shift work is that is not a healthy way to organize a shift plan. That day to night, night to day rotation is not good for the employee that's working it. And we believe that it would be better to have that steady for a significant period of time. We're saying at least semi-annually, ideally annually, where an officer would be assigned to work one particular time of day and keep that time of day for a year. And then when the next year comes, there would be some kind of process, a bid, or however you would design it, in order for the officers to select or the department to kind of shuffle the chairs and assign people where they're needed. This would increase the stability for the people working it. It would ensure consistent supervision for the department, and it would really strengthen the officer and community relationships because they would be working at the same time during the day throughout the year. So they'd be able to foster and develop relationships in the community. So we see that this again is another win-win opportunity for the department and for the community. So taking it all together, you have plenty of people on patrol. They're organized in the right way. We would fix the shift rotation for an extended period of time, and then we would add 2 sergeants to the patrol mix in order to do those things that you need to do, and really add to an already high performing. And we really thought it was a terrific operation. This would just make it that much better and provide better services for the community. And I believe that's it for me.
Okay, thank you, Jim.
Thank you, Paul.
Before we get into the next portion of the presentation, just a couple quick comments. One having to do with Jim's presentation. There might be some initial concern about our recommendation to roll the CRU standalone unit out into patrol operations. How can you ensure that the initiatives are carried out appropriately? You'll see that in my presentation. We have some very specific recommendations about how to enhance operations in regards to community engagement and increase both supervision and accountability for that type of work to really approach it strategically. The other thing I should say at the outset is our report in its entirety is about 87 pages. I am now not going to go through every recommendation in that report, thankfully, but I am going to hit the high priority and the mid-range priority recommendations, the things that this department should be looking to do near term and mid-range. And I will try to anticipate questions that you might have as best I can. So I am going to hope to give you enough detail, but not too much about these. So Jim covered patrol staffing. That's where we began. And now we're going to look at the health of the patient, the department, by doing a full medical workup of all of its functions. So let's begin. First, the report, when you read it, notes that we were informed that there was an SRO from the department assigned at the local high school. When we did our site visit, that was no longer the case. Our very strong recommendation is to reinstate that SRO. It's our understanding that the reason that the SRO was removed was for because of a funding issue, trying to coordinate funding for this position, which is not an easy thing, but yet it does not alleviate the fact that we believe that not having an SRO in a department of this quality in a community like this is a significant deviation from best practices. There is no reason why you should not have an SRO. You've got trained people looking to do the work. Get an SRO back in the school. We would recommend as quickly as you can. When Carol was doing the site visit, she said, perhaps in some future time, there might be a need for even more than one in the middle school, in the elementary schools. Communities like this that have robust SRO programs, several times will have more than one SRO. There might come a time, but first things first, our recommendation is please, and this is, by the way, this is an obligation, just one. It's an obligation, it's a partnership. This is an obligation for the department to work with the township, to work with the school board. They have to actively partner to make this happen. So again, we are not throwing stones at this police department or necessarily at anybody. We're just saying, please make it happen, because the report, I think, goes into great detail, the importance of it. We also, when you read the report, we really have no knowledge about the organization that is providing security at the school. We make no assessment of them. I don't even know the name of the company that's providing guard services currently at the school. But again, we've written books about this. There's an abundant body of literature. SROs really are central to modern policing, and for you not to have it is just unnecessary. I should say that it's just an anecdote. The last project we wrapped up in Wisconsin, I studied the SRO unit, and I sat down with two SROs and their sergeant. And I asked this one young man, he only had 3 years on the job, why did you become an SRO? And he didn't hesitate. He said, because when I was in high school, I had an SRO and I basically wanted to become a cop because of him. And then the woman seated next to him looked at him, looked at me and said, I never thought of that. Same here. So this idea of the role that the SRO becomes a fabric of the community, if recruitment, there are so many pluses for having one. It's a very strong recommendation. So sorry, I have to get back to your question.
So for everybody in the room, there's about a dozen people online behind that presentation, and they can't hear you if you don't speak into the microphone.
I apologize. I think this board in its entirety is very supportive of the SRO. I think we wholeheartedly want the SRO to continue. However, it can't be a unilateral decision. And I say that as the board and the police department can't unilaterally decide that we're going to put a police officer. We have to have cooperation from the school district.
Correct.
I'm not negating the fact that there was conversation and decisions made, some of them financial, but I know that you're making recommendations, maybe not telling us how to go about implementing those recommendations. I think that we just need to ensure that there's willing partnerships and to understand that this wasn't a decision that the board took lightly, not one that we wanted to make, but I think that is one that we were kind of forced into as it related to some of those financial concerns.
We heard that from multiple sources when we did our interviews and focus groups. Thank you for that. With regard to the SRO and with regard to the CRU sergeants, to us, it's critically important to really define the duties and responsibilities of an SRO with particularity. And again, this should not be unilateral. This is not just up to the chief to come up with a list of duties and responsibilities for one of his cops who happens to be at the school. This is where the school board sits down and there is, again, with this partnering taking place, active engagement. What are the expectations? How do we know if the SRO had a good semester? What would that look like? What would that person have done? All right, and it's just dialogue. And it's, again, CERTIS is not, telling you how to make it happen. We're just saying you should really make it happen. Okay, next. With regard to promotions, one of the higher near-term recommendations is going forward, this department should work to establish a more standard promotional process, right? The promotional process that currently is used and in the past has been used, we believe that if you project forward, you should give, I think, considerable thought to either a written examination for sergeant, lieutenant positions, or an oral assessment center. That's an structured interview where you're given scenarios and asked to respond to a panel of experts, typically police supervisors from other agencies, or both. But the key is whatever you select, stick with it, make it transparent. All right, that it should be followed consistently from year to year once you do that. Another point I failed to make at the beginning, because of the length of time that we've studied this department, and it was months ago when we started, to the credit of the department, some kind of low-hanging fruit, perhaps recommendations were already enacted upon. So when we say something like, you need 2 full-time administrative positions here, civilian, non-sworn people to assist the police in their work, doing administrative, sometimes clerical work. Our report says you need 2 full-time people. There is enough work, in our opinion, based on all the, really hundreds of departments we've seen. And to the credit of the department in the township, I understand a additional hire has been made and you're working towards that. But again, we want to be clear, there is plenty of administrative and clerical work that cops should not be doing. They're too highly skilled. They don't want to be doing some of this stuff. And that if you had non-sworn people willing to do it from an operational standpoint, makes a lot of sense. The lieutenant in particular in this agency, and it's just the nature of a department this size in a community like this, organically has taken on far too many tasks for a lieutenant in a department like this. The lieutenant, when we did our site visit, was observed doing what we would consider clerical work. And again, you don't need to pay somebody a lieutenant's salary to do that. Find someone else to do it part-time. Let the lieutenant be a lieutenant, which means supervise people, mentor people, et cetera, et cetera. Things like, purchasing, a wide variety of things we saw that probably the lieutenant's doing it, for a reason. It's historical accident. It came to him. He's good at it. But again, God forbid something happens to you, lieutenant, the department could really be hamstrung. So you need to really disperse these duties. And you'll see in our report these recommendations. We're not saying that training's not happening here. We're saying you should really designate a training coordinator. We're not saying that crime analysis is not happening, but we're saying you should formally designate somebody to own it. Go for additional training, and this takes some of the burden off that lieutenant. And it builds a deeper bench, and it builds a succession plan. And if you go back and look at your RFP that you posted when you were asking for succession planning, and I know the chief took it seriously. He's worked to really try to, build the bench of his supervisors and, potentially the next chief perhaps. We think by just taking those functions, those duties, and dispersing them to qualified people, it's a win-win. There's a lot of value to doing that. We view this as a relatively important thing to do. This department does approach its work strategically, open channels of communication. People, share information. Everything we saw shows a highly functional department. Nevertheless, we're academics. We've written books. I did my doctoral dissertation on police management. We think that monthly internal management meetings, formal meetings where sergeants and above, all sergeants and above, get together once a month to talk about the business of the day. What's up? What's new with the police department? There's a festival coming up next week. What are we doing to plan for it? Active shooter training. Let's talk about it. To us, again, people in the business who've seen from decade to decade, you know, I started in 1981. I've seen the evolution of policing. These meetings are critically important. When I teach this at the graduate level to public administration students, I say it's the functional equivalent of the family dinner table. Mom, dad, and the kids getting together for a meal once a week. Hey, what's up? What's going on? You know, and again, a department this size, there's abundant conversations, but a cop working a late shift might not have spoken to a particular supervisor in a while. Let's just make it happen once a month. And if you read the report in detail, we talk about how to conduct those meetings, what they should be talking about. And obviously, crime reports, traffic, et cetera, et cetera. So that's a relatively strong recommendation from us about the meetings. The detectives here should report directly to the lieutenant, and Carol looked at the investigative function here. In her opinion, the detective should report directly to the lieutenant for case assignment. They should not assign cases to themselves. It should come through the lieutenant. And they become a work group, the lieutenant and your two detectives. Performance metrics for the detectives, essentially, it's that same issue. How do you know if you had a good November as an investigative unit? All right, what would you look at? What type of metrics? They know, they'll be able to come up with it. The lieutenant and the detectives will be able to say, let's take a look at, you know, how many arrests, obviously, warrants executed, warrants applied for, number of prisoners debriefed, et cetera, et cetera. I don't want to get too technical, but solvability factors is a form of triage. Sometimes a stolen bicycle case is just not worth doing fingerprints for. Sometimes it is. And detectives know that. And there's a bit of a science to it. There is a thing known as solvability factors. We think that should be applied, and it would be. NIBRS, National Incident-Based Reporting System. This is essentially the coding of crime reports in the community. You know, the number of burglaries, the number of assaults, et cetera. Police officers take reports. Those reports need to go into a large database. The entering and the coding and the recoding after perhaps an incident was miscoded, kind of tedious work. And currently your detectives are doing it. That's not detectives' work. Detectives need to be doing something else. Non-sworn administrative support people can do that, particularly if your newly hired non-sworn administrative assistant was formerly a police officer who knows the codes. That's a home run. That's really, you're getting a lot of value from that person there. When we did the site visit, we literally shine a light into all the nooks and crannies of the department, which includes a walkthrough of the property room. And in a property room in a police department, there will be firearms, there will be narcotics, and there will be U.S. currency, you know, money taken in a robbery. Best practices dictate that they be segregated, each one separately held in a secured area, probably since Carol made her recommendation to separate. Everything was secured. That's quite clear. I want to be very clear on that. We're not saying somebody could have come in and walked off with any of this. It's just that the guidelines say separate it, and the department probably already has. Okay. Those were really the high priority ones. These are now midterm. I'll go through these quickly. A professional standard sergeant is essentially an internal affairs sergeant. When a community complaint comes in, Officer O'Connell was disrespectful to me. Somebody has to take that report and has to take it seriously, and it has to be a supervisor. So it's our recommendation that this department, which has always taken those complaints, and they've not had many at all, but when they've had them fully investigated very professionally, but we think going forward, one person should own that. One supervisor should get additional training as an internal affairs sergeant and should be that point person, not just to field complaints for things that perhaps had gone wrong, but to proactively do quality control in this police department. And quality control is things like spot audits of property. Every 2 months, I will just randomly pull 3 police reports where property was vouchered, was taken into police custody. There's a car key fob for a BMW. It's supposed to be on shelf 3. Let's go see if it's there. And it's boring. It's like doing inventory, actually, in a department store. But in a police department, it's really important stuff. And your integrity sergeant, we like to call him professional standards sergeant, should be the one to do that. Perhaps pulling body camera footage randomly, just to look at what are our cops doing from a training standpoint, to do callbacks to people who had interactions with police officers. Mrs. Smith, I understand you had an automobile accident a couple of weeks ago. Hope everybody's doing well. Could I ask you a couple questions about Officer O'Connell? Did he appear respectful? Was he prompt? Was he boom, boom, boom? Right? Because you need to this department needs to give themselves credit for the good work that they're doing. The community talks about it. We could actually come up with some real objective evidence that this is a very squared away department. So quality assurance and accountability, things like sick leave abuse, looking at line of duty injuries, et cetera, et cetera. Next. Okay. When the SRO comes back, I'm going to be positive about this. When the SRO comes back, the duties and responsibilities, as I said, have to be very, very clear and consistent with best practices, and I'm sure they will be. But again, those expectations need to be discussed, communicated with the school board as well. Next, this department it approaches its work very strategically. That's quite clear. But it does not have a document, a 2026 through 2030 multi-year strategic plan. Most departments don't have one of those. But the 4 of us at Certus believe most should. It's not a bad idea to outline strategic objectives for this agency going forward. What would that look like? Well, in a place like Lower Gwynedd, I would say that the chief could say, looking at the issues of the day, maybe vehicle crashes are a challenge here, vehicle accidents with pedestrians. We will attempt to reduce those next year by 20%. And here's how we're going to do it. We're going to come up with these strategies. We're going to educate the public. We're going to do enhanced enforcement, boom, boom, boom. And then at the end of the year, see how you did. Well, we only reduced it by 15%. That's a good thing. And you got that much more to work on. So the report talks about why a multi-year strategic plan is helpful. We think it'd be a good idea to do that. We also, part of that process would be try to come up with performance metrics for all functions, right? For training, for your administrative people, number of freedom of information requests that are processed each year, et cetera, et cetera. But the detective unit is different than patrol. We should have performance metrics for those detectives, for people doing traffic enforcement, for the community engagement people, et cetera. Investigative call-outs and overtime. Again, we're getting into, I won't say minutia, but these are not mission critical. But investigative call-outs, we're suggesting do a little bit more analysis to see exactly what are the drivers of overtime and see if you could perhaps be more efficient, or perhaps not. But at least you can explain where the overtime is being expended. Enhance the analytical capability of the department. The department does crime analysis and has access to high-level products, analytical products. However, nobody is assigned as the crime analyst. And again, if somebody owns it, they can get additional training, get some time perhaps off patrol to sharpen these skills, and certainly take some of the burden off your lieutenant currently. Property audit. Periodic audits are done by this department. That's a very good thing, just to make sure things don't disappear. However, an all-item audit, it's like going into Target and counting every item. Nobody wants to do that. Very time-consuming. All-item audit has not been done in several years. You're probably due for one. It's not hard to make an agreement with the county or the state police or some retired law enforcement person to perhaps do that for you over time. You know, you don't have to get to it immediately. Property policies, again, these are very minor tweaks. I don't really think I need to spend that much time with it. The training coordinator, again, what we're saying is high quality training takes place in this department. However, if one sergeant is deemed the training coordinator, the person who owns training, that is the individual who spends a little bit of think time. What type of training? I know O'Connell wants to go for this type of training. What type of training would be best? You know, particularly certain types of training. Let me give you an example. Active shooter training is in many respects a very hyper-aggressive type of training. If I was a training coordinator, I would make sure that immediately after my officers went to some type of training like that, they would go to other training that emphasizes de-escalation. This department does a lot of work on de-escalation, and they should be applauded for that. But this idea of the timing of you know, the types of courses that are given, somebody should take that responsibility away from the lieutenant and perform that function, maintain the kind of the roster of all the training taking place, and actually do some of the training in-house. That you have people talented enough to, more than just firearms qualification, develop lessons, in-service lessons based on the issues of the day. There might be an encounter between an officer and an autistic child that could have gotten very ugly. And as part of the debrief, the chief might say, Sergeant O'Connell, training guy, come up with a program. Give me a 2-hour block on that. These officers exceed state minimums with the type of in-service they get every year. But if we can do it, we can afford it, let's do more. There's plenty of organizations, national and regional and local, will come in and talk to officers. Many officers have special needs. Children is an important topic. That type of training, we think training coordinator could really help devise. Supervisor development. In the past, the supervisors have availed themselves of high-level basic management courses and then executive level all the way up to the FBI Academy. Critically important for a department of this size. You want to build your bench. Ideally, you would like, you know, your next chief to come up the ranks. You want to make sure that they have access to the quality training that's out there. De-escalation, they use simunitions here in their training. They're using state-of-the-art equipment and technologies to emphasize de-escalation, not using deadly physical force, including grappling, you know, jujitsu type stuff. We don't see that in every department, and firearms simulations. So again, kudos to this department for doing that. That's really state-of-the-art stuff. Federal training resources, there's a lot out there, but the department knows that. We're emphasizing, continue to use things like, say, the FBI LEADA, L-E-E-D-A program for your people. Recruitment and retention, I'm almost done, by the way, probably about another 5 minutes. Recruitment and retention, have to say this department has been blessed that you have been a destination for police officers. You really have. And your police officers stay a long time. So both recruitment and retention has been a strength of this department. What I think most people don't know, the cops know this, but I think most Americans don't understand that we are currently still in the midst of an unprecedented crisis in policing, a recruitment crisis. Young people generally do not want to go into this profession. And most departments are struggling greatly. And when we've gone around the country, I've been quoted as saying, departments are either poachers or poachees. You're either losing your cops because you're not paying them enough and the working conditions are bad and they could go across the street and do better for themselves and their family, or not. They're happy and they take pride in their work and they want to be here. You're in that category, and congratulations. But it might not always be like that. So it's low on the scale of recommendations. Even though you engage in a consortium for hiring new cops, you need a strategy, a recruitment and retention strategy for this department, for these personnel that you have. So it's our recommendation to put together a standing recruitment team, all ranks, and get those officers who are from central casting, who are perfect recruiters. And it could be somebody with 2 years on the job. That young person, get them out in front and be prepared for a rainy day, because things can change very quickly. Just like in a school where things can turn very, very bad in terms of violence or suicides or drug overdoses. Those things happen very, very quickly, and you need to have the capacity to deal with that, which is why you need this SRO. You're doing well. It's not raining yet, but a rainy day might come for this department. One of your adjoining communities might offer a lot more money and better benefits and quality of work life, and you might lose those incoming recruits who would have otherwise landed here. You might lose some of your best people. You can't afford to have that happen. So if you would, put together a recruitment and retention team and try to come up with a multi-year strategy. You'll know what's best for this community in terms of recruitment. Annual performance reviews, they do them for all of their officers and non-sworns. And interestingly, in those forms are quite good. They ask for kind of a discussion, a dialogue between the person being reviewed and the rater, their supervisor, about career path. That's a very good thing. You need to take that seriously and make sure that every member of your department, sworn or non-sworn, gets one of these every year, and that is done with great care to lay out what the career path that individual, excuse me, desires and what works best for the department. But, oh no. Okay, community notification protocols and social media. When we did the external focus groups, we did hear from people who had some concern that emergency type communications with the community could be a little bit better. And a couple instances, rumored shooter at the high school, the blogosphere blows up, people start texting, calls being made into the front desk of the department and town hall. We have some recommendations about how to come up with a protocol, make sure the one you have is good, as well as social media strategy to make sure it's professionally done. And again, that the police officers are not just doing this on their own, that it's coordinated with the township's overarching media strategy, particularly when it comes to branding the department to future applicants. I'm sorry for going too quick, but again, 87 pages. These speak for themselves. Neighborhood watch programs, business watch programs, they've been done here in the past. If you read the report, strongly recommend really robust programs, particularly now with that CRU function going back to patrol. There's a lot that could be done to enhance those programs here. Citizens Police Academy. You probably don't have the resources to run your own academy, but it's valued in almost every community that we've seen. Partner with another agency or two and run an academy. You will get a lot of goodwill by having members of your community come in and really engage with your cops through a Citizens Police Academy. Long-term implementation. One of the things that's in the report The chief regularly meets with the township manager. We recommend that the chief, in addition to everything that's done, have a structured one-on-one once a month to talk about kind of key performance indicators for the department. And if we were a little vague, and we might have been in the report about what might those KPIs be, again, a copy in my book. I'll send you to the chapter. That's a shameless plug, I guess. But you know, again, it's the issues of the day. An interesting anecdote, back when I was doing my dissertation, I went to Rikers Island, the Department of Corrections, because I was studying their CompStat process, the way they were managing, it's the biggest jail in the United States. They have to feed those people, they have to ventilate, they have to heat them in the winter, and religious services and everything, you can imagine. And when they came up with key performance indicators, I went to a meeting, a monthly meeting, where the one indicator of importance, the biggest one for Rikers Island, it was not escapes, it was not violence, you know, prisoner on prisoner, inmate on inmate violence. It was the temperature of chicken. And I couldn't believe it when I heard it. And there was this huge debate about temperature of chicken. And it took me a couple of minutes to realize that the Department of Correction in New York City had been sued by the inmates for serving undercooked chicken in the cafeteria, had sickened them greatly, had hospitalized many of them, and they got sued. And then the lawsuit ended up in a consent decree where the city of New York said, all right, we won't poison our inmates anymore with undercooked chicken. And then lo and behold, as they're monitoring this under the consent decree, they find out that, again, the frozen chicken was not thawed. And as you can imagine, the commissioner at the time was quite concerned and said, drop everything, forget everything else, cook those chickens. So the point is, the issues of the day for this department is going to vary. You know, it could be fentanyl, or it could be something more innocuous, but it's those types of things that will be discussed at the monthly meetings within the department and between the township manager and the chief. Field training program, we had a couple of recommendations about the way the field training process takes place here. Interestingly, a lot of the people going through on-the-job training, the structured field training program here, which is certainly more than adequate, but a lot of your people are lateral transfers coming from other agencies, prior experience. Social media engagement, annual reports. It's not a bad idea to literally have a report to the stakeholders about what went on in this agency in terms of performance. So that when you look at the report, you'll see a recommendation about that. Cadets, community service officers, perhaps. Departments are now trying to grow their own in terms of recruits. So there's a variety of strategies for that. You'll see reference to that in the department, whether it's a cadet program or a community service officer program, to give a young person a job, pay them, train them, bring them into the department to do some type of code enforcement or work at public events. A police foundation, there's a recommendation about that. That's a nonprofit group. We did encounter in our focus groups many members of the public that mentioned, even financially, yeah, people, you know, people really want to support this department. Salaries and benefits, it just goes to retention. Part of that retention process is just constantly monitor, not just the salary, not just bonuses, right? Bonuses typically are not pensionable. Those are one-time things, all right? Look at the packages and make sure you're competitive to stay at the top of your game, which you are. Community service officers, just mentioned that. It's a good recruitment tool. The focus groups, I will just tell you the major themes. You can't read them. I'll just tell you, both internal and external stakeholders tell the story of a very professional, a very well-trained police department. Cops who like working here, cops who feel valued here. And then when we talked to the civilians, we heard They really value the cops, and the cops appear professional, and they appear friendly, and they appear like they want to work here. We've been in 44 states doing these studies. We don't hear that a lot. So congratulations to the community and to the department for that, because your reputation is well deserved. That's about all I could say with that. In terms of weaknesses, again, they're kind of minor, and I think we discussed most of them. Lack of clarity, perhaps about certain high-profile events. The communication processes could probably get better, but no red alerts. There was some. I'd spoken to John Farrell about this. A little anxiety, I think, about the future leadership of the department. We're at a point, in the history of this department, where there will be a new chief at some time. We heard some concerns from the police officers, and rightfully so. I would be concerned, like to know what the future of the department is going to be. But no anxieties to the point that it touches upon any operational issues. We heard the same types of things, people in the community very curious about, who's the next chief going to be, et cetera, et cetera. But to kind of go back to where we began, I'll end where we began. You put the RFP out at the right time in the history of this department and in this community. With the new chief coming in the near future, in a couple of years, a year or two, whatever it is, maybe things like a strategic plan and stuff, yeah, maybe that'll come about. You don't have to do it now. And certainly this chief doesn't need to do that now. But we think we gave you, hopefully, a roadmap that next person can use with the good people that you already have in place to really take what is a highly functional, well-respected professional department that's really hitting on all cylinders, it really is, and to take it even to the next level for many years to come. So I think with that, I will end my presentation. And if there's anything I didn't cover or any specific questions about anything that I raised, Jim and I would be happy to address it. Yes. Thank you so much.
Okay. Thank you for that. One quick question. In the very beginning, you mentioned we were talking about parole, adding two sergeants to the parole operations. Patrol. Patrol. It's been a day. Is the recommendation that sergeants be folks from within the department be promoted to sergeant, or is that hiring two additional officers to be the sergeants?
I'm going to let Jim. Jim, can you answer that one?
Yeah, oh, exactly. Both. You need two extra employees, and
Okay.
we would recommend you promote from within.
Okay, thank you.
Jim, just to follow up on that, I apologize. So we need two extra employees, hire within for the sergeants. Are you saying that we should backfill the two positions that then became sergeants?
Correct.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure. Thank you.
Okay.
Are there any other questions in the room?
Actually, I did come with a number of business cards. If anybody does think of a question, please take a card. Feel free to call me directly. That's my cell phone. Questions or comments. Be more than happy to hear from you. And again, any clarification. But give if you would give that report a good read. A lot of detail there. But again, it all tells the same story. Very strong, very well-resourced department.
There is
Just-
a question in the chat. So they are asking, in addition to the admin staff increase, there are two more headcount. I'm not really sure what that means. The person who put that in the chat, if you wanted to unmute yourself and ask the question, we could hear you. Maybe, again, I could just clarify by saying,
our report calls for, in terms of the non-sworn, 2 full-time people to do the types of administrative work that
Okay.
I discussed.
Sure. Are there any other questions for anybody that's watching online?
Is there any additional questions for anybody that's here? Any additional questions for anybody present today? Seeing none, I'm going to turn it over to our chief.
I'm going to come up here and talk with you, Paul. Just a couple of things. First, I want to talk to the board. We had a lot of discussions when this started a few months back. And as you know, I was not on board with a study. I had a lot of questions. And I couldn't have been happier with the job that Certus, I shouldn't say happier, they treated us so well. There are a couple of police chiefs in the background going to be listening to this presentation. There's a lot of curiosity of what was going to happen. But Paul, your group was incredible. They were professional. I wish I could have known you guys a long, long time ago. Myself and the board will have a lot of discussions about everything you said. And like you said earlier, we've already implemented a lot of the recommendations the minutia, the easy things, the evidence rooms, simple stuff. Appreciate those things really, really well. So I want to thank the board for going through with this and not listening to me. I'd also like to address the people in the room tonight, if I could. John Charlie, the former chief of police for Lower Gwinnett, who got me ready in succession planning. He's the reason I'm here tonight. He came tonight in case I didn't like something I heard, I was going to blame him. Because you always get to blame your predecessor for one thing. So I still have that one in my pocket. And I also want to address the other members of the department in the room. I think Paul underestimated a little bit about the job and the responsibilities that Mike Gargan has here. And I brought that to your attention before. Mike is an incredible, incredible asset to this department. But the members of the department that are here and will watch this later are the reason that this, what I would call a glowing report. The men and women of this department care. They want to be here and they want to do a good job. I'll take a little credit for being a good person and trying to set that example of just do a good job. So I'm really thrilled with how this was presented. I'm looking forward to working with the board on implementing a lot of the things that we can do. Money will be part of the equation. Unfortunately, with budgets, we have those problems. But it was first time I've been through something like this. I really felt like we were turned upside down, and everything was very positive. So it was a very good learning experience. It was a pleasure working with this group, and I hope to work with them in the future. Hopefully there'll be some things that we can still rely on them and get their input from. But I want to thank the guys that are here tonight. Incredible job. They deserve 100% of the credit. Without them, this doesn't look the way, because I'm a very good, you do this, you do this, you do this. I'm really good at that. I'm not very good at actually doing the work, but I'm very good at assigning other people and giving them the tools and the responsibility to follow through with it. And these guys want to do it. So that's all I got. So thank you, thank you, thank you.
There is one more question in the chat. They're asking whether the
yes.
report will be posted.
Yes, to the question online, the full report will be posted online to the township. The final report will be posted online on the township website when we get it. We don't have it. This is a draft report and the presentation to the public. Sorry, I'm sitting down. I wanted to thank Certus and all the work that you did. And guys were wonderful, amazing. I want to thank the chief for trusting us because he didn't trust us in the beginning. I think this board is unique in that we're data driven. We want information, we want the tools, and we want to make decisions not off of our feelings, but off concrete data and information that can be informed and inform us for a long period of time. Certus gave us, and I'll say it, it's a glowing report. We're extremely proud of how you were represented Lower Gwinnett Township and how you've always represented Lower Gwinnett Township. We knew that was going to be the result of the report, but we wanted to make sure that we could share that with not only the police department, but with the public in general. Give everyone the opportunity to ask questions. We didn't want this to be something internal that we kept and put on a shelf. We're utilizing this as an information, plan for us as we move forward. So again, incredibly proud of Lower Gwinnett Police Department, the chief, everyone who makes that up. I think you represent Lower Gwinnett well. And thank you all for coming out tonight and taking this Tuesday off. Oh, okay.
I almost forgot. One of the slide presentations talked about recruitment and the trouble of recruiting people. The people on our department, we are given a test. And the consortium of 15 to 20 departments that we've done in the past for hiring, we're lucky if we get 100 people to take the test. We're lucky if we get 75 people for 15 to 20 departments. This Saturday, our department alone is giving a test. We have over 250 people coming for the physical agility test. We received over 300 applications of people that took our written test, and the response for people that are coming to the test Saturday at Wissahickon High School, we have over 250 confirmed. We are not going to tell some of the people that are listening how we did that. I will share that with you secretly. We're not paying people to come, but and I think a lot of that is they want to work here. But I'm so proud of, I don't even want to try and name the names of the people that did all this work, but they're listening, they hear, they did a phenomenal job of, I told Mike Argan, I said, breakfast was over 50, I'll buy for over 50. I think I owe him a steak dinner.
Did he get a steak dinner?
Yeah, well, he didn't get anything yet, but that's happening this Saturday. I just wanted to add that comment.
Thank you. Thank you. We also appreciative of the public who participated in the focus groups, all of the stakeholders who participated. And I can't help but be thankful for John and Mimi and the coordination that it took to put this together. This was the amount of asks that we have of our staff is tremendous. And this was a big ask, and we appreciate all the work that everybody put in to get this done. Again, thank you so much. With that, I'd like to make a motion to adjourn. Is there a second? All those in favor? Meeting is adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you.